Adrian and Matteo are experiencing the biggest change a couple can face. A baby has just entered their lives. The most meaningful phase of their relationship is just beginning to unfold. In the opening scene, Adrian is preparing to go on a date night with Matteo, while Ellie, their child, is whimpering on the bed. After choosing what to wear, she starts looking for her boyfriend cheerfully and finds him in his man cave, working on a piece of wood. Clearly, he has forgotten that they had plans for this evening. He is quick to remember and get ready, though. While driving, he apologizes for forgetting about the date night, and Adrian responds that it is okay. Naturally, however, it isn't okay. To be frank, none of them truly mean what they say. This simple, uncomfortable interaction opens up a space for countless complaints to come out, and soon the couple is engaged in a fight. We learn that Matteo has a huge problem with Adrian's mother babysitting their child, while Adrian despises how much of a scrapper her boyfriend is. Of course, it isn't the first time they immerse themselves in an argument like this. Without it being taken care of, it's soon over, and the couple reaches their destination. While talking to their friends, Gary and Kevin, they reveal that there's a couple of important changes happening in their lives other than having a baby. Most notably, they bought a new house 2 weeks ago. The friends assume that they are married, but Adrian explains that the two are actually avoiding that invitation. To add to the problems that were uncovered while driving to this place, when Adrian goes over to her friend, Liam, we see how jealous and restless Matteo becomes. Surely, there are more issues in their relationship than meets the eye. Later that night, he expresses that jealousy quite harshly and openly, and driving home, they make it obvious how much distance there is between them. Naturally, these kinds of fights that are directed towards winning, blaming, and projecting bitterness make that distance grow further. And after Matteo blames Adrian for their own unhappiness, the prospect of splitting up is first put forward. This is exactly the moment when they suddenly see a bright light coming towards them. A car hits them at high speed, and it seems that none of them should survive this crash. Visions of her baby and the sound of Matteo's voice are flashing through her mind as Adrian is ushered into an operation room. The last thing that she sees is the sea and rolling waves illuminated with sunlight. Suddenly, however, she finds herself standing in the hospital. Her head is dizzy, and she struggles to maintain control over her feet. She can see her own body, and her mother and father are hunched over it in tears. A state of panic grabs her entire being as the body is taken to a morgue. She tries to wake herself up, but there is no use. It all turns black, but soon Adrian finds herself on the couch in her house. Ellie is playing in the living room, and it's all peaceful. Adrian calls to her, but the baby has no reaction to her mother's voice anymore. Afraid, Adrian goes outside in the sun and finds how quickly the environment around her changes. Now she is attending her own funeral. Matteo is struggling to make a speech. His voice is cracked, and without moving forward with his word, he apologizes and walks away. Some women follow him to help cool down, and it is when following her that Adrian hears the voice of her baby. She drops chasing Matteo and goes inside a colossal room, and the sight of Ellie soon becomes tough to endure. Adrian turns to a mirror and, inside, sees her child again. Now, however, Ellie is much older. Living with her grandma and grandpa, she reads Adrian's journals, and a rational question pops into her head. Did her mother truly love her father? Matteo seems to be gone from her life completely at this point. He has left her, and some unknown, irresistible emotion takes over Ellie's mind. Angry at Matteo for leaving their baby, Adrian storms out of the room and finds herself in the hospital again. After walking aimlessly for a while, the environment around her changes once more, and she appears on a bridge. For a reason unknown to her, she starts ascending a latticework, and this is the moment she hears Matteo's voice, screaming at her to come down. Taken aback that he can see her, she is assured that Matteo is gone too, but the latter says that he isn't. As Adrian goes on about what he saw after the crash, Matteo explains that this is the reality. Nobody is so despicable as to deserve to spend eternity on a freeway. She just had a concussion, and Ellie is fine too. Adrian isn't fully convinced. To prove that she is deceased, she heads over towards the traffic and says that nothing will happen to her. She actually feels as if a car hits her, but suddenly she finds herself on a sidewalk again in Matteo's arms. The latter seems to have caught her. Adrian is assured that she's alive. In the next scene, she wakes up in her room. Her parents are discussing whether to take Ellie home with them, but Adrian has no power to interfere. Suddenly, she begins having hallucinations. Terrified that a boy is standing behind her window, she rushes outside and runs into Matteo. It seems that he was the one walking behind the house. After learning what Adrian's parents were talking about, he makes sure to let them know that he's perfectly capable of taking care of his family, and, coming back to Adrian, manages to extinguish her paranoia for a while. She is going to be fine, and no one is going to take their baby. Suddenly, however, Adrian finds herself questioning every detail of her existence. Her perception has been so altered that nothing can be obviously true for her. Even though she has a daughter, she becomes oblivious, and here, to remind her of Ellie and put her out of this state, Matteo remembers the time when she was born. The birth seems to have been painful and scary. It was a traumatic event in its own right, but Adrian managed to emerge from it successfully. Recalling the moment when Ellie first started eating, Adrian re-experiences that all-illuminating feeling. Mateo's strategy worked, and he is eager to tell her their entire story in this manner so that she can know she's okay. Adrienne isn't sure this will work. Her near-end experience was so strong that her perception is now extremely untrustworthy. She can't even be sure that Mateo is really talking to her right now. But still, when the latter gets into bed with her and, with a calm voice, offers to tell their story from the very beginning, she agrees to listen. And so, this is how it all started. They meet at Adrienne's surprise party. Recalling the moment, she can see herself walking up to Mateo and taking a photo of him as he blushes from social awkwardness. A girl named She comes up to him then, and the memory is stirred up. This girl has caused a lot of trouble in their relationship. Mateo is eager to continue with the night. However, Adrienne feels now as if she's sitting on a couch with him again, young and excited to be engaged in a conversation with someone who's so concentrated on her. They speak about ordinary stuff, but suddenly, Mateo starts talking about a he went through when he was only 10. His stepfather was his mother when he called the cops. The stepdad was taken away, and the mother blamed everything on Mateo. Despite this story, however, Adrienne and Mateo continue their conversation cheerfully. They feel as if they're the only ones at the party. As the memory continues, Mateo asks to crash for the night and sleep on the couch. He lies about a meeting he has to attend nearby tomorrow. And even though Adrienne knows he's lying, she lets him stay. They talk till dawn, and when Mateo tries to kiss her for the first time, he bumps her head clumsily. In the present, the couple continues with their story, and going forward in time, they remember how one of their most romantic nights ended in literal flames. In this memory, after realizing there is a fire in the room, Mateo runs out, leaving her alone. But soon he comes back with a fire extinguisher, and puts it out. While he is gone, Adrienne feels abandoned in the face of danger, and in the present, while remembering this story, this feeling grasps her heart again. This is how their first memory session ends. That night, a horrifying nightmare wakes Adrienne up. She wants to go over to Mateo, angry that he wasn't in bed with her. The latter justifies himself by saying that he's been doing some research about people undergoing traumatic events. The uneasy, doubtful thoughts conquer Adrienne's mind, and she becomes convinced of the imaginary purpose of her being here. She thinks that after passing, she's been brought back to Mateo to make him step up and stay with Ellie, instead of running away from her. Adrienne is sure that when Mateo gets ready to take on full responsibility for their child, she will disappear again. To answer this episode of hers, Mateo turns to memories again, and to assure her of the reality of her existence, he helps her remember the days they spent in Mexico. It is a magical memory filled with liberating, awe-breaking pictures that the couple has recreated and told countless times over the course of their relationship. They would give everything to live in this memory forever, on the shores of a bay and in a boat around which dolphins swim. Presently, Mateo admits that he was planning to propose but chose not to, thinking that Adrienne would get mad. In the light of this memory, it is doubly sad that this couple has drifted away from each other over time. Suddenly, while re-experiencing this wonderful moment, Adrienne feels odd. She sees mud all over her and, struggling to breathe, emerges out of this memory into her bathroom. In a state of panic, she takes in as much oxygen as possible, but it's of no use. Finally, Mateo makes her look into his eyes, and after a while, Adrienne manages to calm down. This is the moment when Mateo feels it's safe to walk away and come back with some towels. He makes the mistake of leaving Adrienne alone in this state. After a couple seconds, she starts hearing a voice and sees an airy figure behind her, resembling the Reaper, whispering to her that it is all over. Rushing outside, she tramps inside Ellie's room and finds her petrified and cold. Embracing her, she starts screaming desperately, thinking that she's deceased. Experiencing the passing of her baby in its full terror, she sees her mother, Patty, running into the room. Ellie starts crying too, and as Mateo hurries inside, the hallucination dissipates. The next day, she is taken to a hospital to be examined physically. She has inflicted wound on her belly, but other than that, she is fine in that regard. The problem is in her perception. Adrienne is completely dissociated from her environment. Time and space have become liquid and relative to her. Some strong medications are prescribed by doctors, and soon Adrienne's motions become rigid, and her feelings get colder. She starts going to a psychiatrist, and as Ellie is taken care of by her parents and Mateo, she shows no sign of moving forward in dealing with this enormous trauma. One sunny afternoon, she is watching a movie about zombies, feeling particularly drawn to them, and she says to Mateo that she realizes something is wrong with her. She feels soulless, and even though Mateo stresses strongly that everybody can see her, Adrienne still believes that she's deceased. She can find no other explanation for the sense of being completely hollowed out from within. Her boyfriend tries to begin another session of remembrance here, but Adrienne doesn't let him do that. Instead, she recalls something else. In the reminiscence she recalls, they were first visiting their new home 2 weeks before the accident. A bunch of young people are living in this place together, one of whom claims to be an apprentice of a real philosopher. She tells Adrienne that her lifespan seems extremely short. It can mean two things: either she will pass away very young, or she will finish out her days without experiencing existence to the fullest. Adrienne can see it clearly now. It is her fault that the accident happened. She knew that something was off, even at the moment of exiting the party, but she still underestimated her own fate. To argue back, Mateo says that fate has nothing to do with it. It's just a mere coincidence that the accident happened 2 weeks after some college kid prophesied her demise. They were fighting that night, and the underlying effect of this fact surfaces other unpleasant memories from their past. In the recollection that follows, Adrian has just gotten a new job. Her and Mateo are arguing about the path they want to tread in their relationship. Mateo doesn't want a house, nor does he want Adrian to immerse herself in a new, more demanding career path that will force them to spend less time together. The fight resolves nothing, of course, and after they break away from each other, Adrian runs into her new co-worker named Liam. He makes a move on her, and Mateo sees this from afar. Instead of punching Liam in the face, however, he makes friends with him, deciding to have his enemies closer. He is sensing how Adrian is drifting away from him, and he's almost sure that she is going to cheat on him. The befriending of Liam is just a way for him to delay this process. Adrian doesn't cheat on him, of course, but if she's completely honest, she wants to. Liam himself has nothing to do with this, however. She wants to get back with Mateo for cheating on her with she in the first place. Naturally, the latter denies it strongly, and this remembering session of theirs turns into a big fight. Before it can go on for longer, however, somebody knocks on the door. Adrian hears that it's a priest, and even though Mateo stresses that he comes here regularly for other reasons, Adrian is sure that the clergyman has come for her. Suddenly, she begins changing for her burial, and urges Mateo to move on and marry someone else that he loves. Just not she. Her boyfriend surrenders here. It is only when Adrian takes some pills that he rushes to her reactively and takes them out of her mouth by force. He won't let her go yet. This impatience of hers reminds him of a memory, and he uses this opportunity to tell it. It was at Carnival that his friend Dane gave him advice to talk to Adrian about having babies. He tells him that the latter wants it badly, and he will soon lose her if he remains so passive. Mateo remembers this story to illustrate Adrian's impatience, but the latter recalls other details from it, mainly the manner in which she walks up to Mateo, and how suddenly the latter's gaze and motions change. She asks if the two are married, and Adrian says jokingly that she would never let a goofy man like Mateo own her. She finds here that Mateo has been lying to her about the fact that he doesn't talk to she anymore. The latter even invites Mateo to begin a woodworking job at her father's new house, and Matt happily agrees. Adrian's jealousy skyrockets, but this isn't how this memory ends. In the end, to change her mindset about his intentions and his seriousness about their relationship, Mateo tells her that he wants to have babies with her. For a second, Adrian feels at ease. She's glad that their love endured all the struggles, but suddenly, even in the moment of re-experiencing this liberating memory, she sees a hooded figure standing by a tree, gazing at her ominously. Mateo notices it too, and blood is frozen in his veins. Mortality domesticates their minds once more, and Adrian finds herself walking in a graveyard. Mateo gets really scared here. His girlfriend falls into an unconscious state, and it takes a few seconds of screaming and shaking to bring her back to her senses. It is already night at the present time. It seems they've been revisiting memories for a very long time. Nothing seems to work to make things better. They are both on the verge of surrendering completely. But it is when Adrian decides to roll over and doze off into sleep that she suddenly turns around and kisses Mateo warmly. The veracity of meaningful emotions is expressed in an extremely narrow chunk of time. Mateo gets pleasantly confused. He makes a silly joke, makes her smile, and leaves the room. He thinks that this is the unusual way in which this exhausting day will end. But when Adrian is left alone, she ponders over something for a while, then stands up and leaves the room too. Shortly after, we see her walking on the roof of a tall building, going towards the edge. Getting on the curb, she straightens her spine, looks down, and thankfully, this is the exact moment when Mateo appears behind her. Walking slowly and carefully, he emphasizes that this shouldn't be the truth their daughter has to live with. She can't do this. Knowing that he has no right to speak about truth as long as he remains completely truthful himself, he admits to her now that she has always been right about she. Even though Adrian always knew this on a subconscious level, this news is strict. A memory in which Mateo leaves to go work with she's father for 2 months comes to her, and she sees how he fights with Patty, and walks out of the door, leaving her completely alone. Now she has to know how it all happened, and Mateo immerses himself in detailed reminiscence. It seems that he kissed she only once, and the kiss was no longer than a couple of seconds. Remembering this, Mateo can feel exactly as he felt before, as if Adrian is here, and the thought appears in his head that he can only be hers. He's been hiding it all this time because he was afraid of losing her. For the first time, we see a resolution, a consensus between the couple. After this exposition of humorous honesty, Adrian sees how her behavior contributed to his attitudes. He left because he felt invisible and alone, with all the trouble and no love. Presently, still standing on the curb, she is assured that she should have loved him better. It is a shame they had so little time to resolve all their issues. Here, however, Mateo turns his back on the past and looks into the future. It can still be bright. They still have time to get through this soul-breaking part of their lives. Making this point, he reaches over with his hand, and Adrian comes down. Both the past and the future have been taken care of. Now it's time for Mateo to come back into the present and make significant changes. Suddenly, he kneels in front of her and asks her to get married. Struck by this, Adrian's initial thought is that it is too late. However, as tears fill her eyes, she is convinced otherwise. She says yes. They exchange their vows in the next scene, and finally, they're pronounced husband and wife. They kiss each other 3 times, once for the past, once for the present, and once for the future. They're happy. Slow dancing with Mateo that evening, Adrian feels alive. And relieved from her chilling demise, she says it again and again. In this bright, delightful moment, all struggles are left in the past. Full of life, she is playing with Ellie in the next scene, arguing with her parents about Mateo. They've always thought lowly of him, but the argument is cut short by her sister Maggie, who walks into the door with a friendly smile. They drive to her doctor's office then, and when she calls Mateo, the traumatic memory resurfaces in her consciousness again. It might be too early for her to be traveling by car. Gradually, the experience she underwent reveals itself to her once more, and noticing the hooded figure, she jumps out of the moving car. Here, in the exact same place where the accident happened, her trauma memory unveils itself in full force. She can see herself in the burning car as a hooded figure stands outside and bangs on the door. This must be the hooded figure that has resembled the end to her till now, but reliving the crash, she can now notice that it's only a kind-hearted person trying to save her. Walking on the crossroads, Adrian goes over to the place where she noticed the hooded man, and finds him near one of the blue tarps. He recognizes her face immediately, and says something so dramatically significant that it changes the perception of the entire story. To be sure that his recognition is correct, he asks her if she is the woman who survived the crash that proved fatal to her husband. Adrian's lungs compress, and falling into a state of panic, she fails to breathe. She can remember the whole truth that has been completely repressed from her consciousness now. It wasn't her own body that she saw in the past, it was Mateo's. The face of the hooded man starts changing forms, and seeing the face of the Reaper in him again, Adrian plunges herself forward, attacking him for taking Mateo's life. Her parents catch up to her, and, apologizing to the man, take their daughter back to their car. Upon coming back home, she rushes into Mateo's man cave and finds herself going through his things in tears and finding a picture of them. It was taken during the warmest of their days. She takes the box full of his stuff over to her room and empties it over her bed. Adrian's sorrow is immeasurable. She asks to be left alone, and once her family is gone, she attempts to follow Mateo into the afterlife. After an unknown amount of time, the sound of Ellie crying reaches Adrian's consciousness, and trying to get to her, she ends up banging herself on the floor. Soon she is ushered into the hospital, and after a few hours, she comes back to her senses. Time passes then, and even though she feels as down as ever, it is obvious that the worst is over. One night, she is woken up by Ellie's crying. She goes over to her room and, taking her in her hands, sees the meaning of her future life. This is the moment she is finally healed. Soon, she moves into another home and begins her new life. Years go by, and having successfully overcome the trauma, she gets to travel to Mexico with her daughter, and after saying goodbye to Mateo, they meet the new dawn together with Ellie and the dolphins.